Hello, listeners. Welcome to Courage Talks. Special guest today is Alex Papadopoulos. He's an ultramarathoner, race director, organization race consultant. Among his many laurels, he's run the Hurt 100 miler 17 times. I know he's a bit crazy. And let's unwrap the craziness behind Alex. Welcome on board.
Thank you, sir, for having me. Thank you, Hital. Appreciate the time you're giving to this conversation. And let's get started.
Pleasure is all mine. The story behind Courage Talks is my book, Against All Odds, where I narrate a lot of stories of courage from my father's life history. What does courage mean to you?
Courage, I think courage takes on different forms for different people at different times of their lives, different situations. So it really manifests differently. As we started talking and before we sat down just doing, it sort of took me back for a second. It's like, okay, we talk a lot about courage, but what's like the true definition of it? So I found that researching that very different thing. But yeah, I think generally across the board, the quick thing that I wrote was that manifests really in three different realms of emotional, moral, and the physical. And so really, depending on the situation in life and what you're rolling down, whether it's business, the ultramarathon, families and friendships, and various dyadic relationships in life, it goes differently. But I think in the end it really boils down to pushing yourself, getting out of a comfort zone, whether it's speaking up for yourself, speaking up for maybe someone who's being oppressed, having the courage to go into unfamiliar territory. And that can be physical, psychological, and emotional, to whether it's to break barriers, to support people, and make improvements for yourself.
Any role models for courage? Anyone whom you would like to cite as someone who's been an inspiration for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks very fortunate I draw from. But speaking specifically, the first folks that come to mind are sort of my father's story, my grandmother's story on my mother's side, and also both my grandfathers.
Is there any story or any incident?
Yeah, I could belabor a lot of them. You said Papadopoulos, clearly Greek descent. One might make the quick assumption. So yes, it's over 90% Greek, Balkan. And we came from the Asia Minor. Both sides of the family lived in Asia Minor in the early 1900s when the Ottomans persecuted both the Greeks and the Armenians. I won't belabor the tragedy for conversation's sake. Sort of a bottom line, both sides of the family, they had to escape persecution, had to escape death in various different ways. My father's family, my grandfather, their family was split up. There was 4 kids and they were split up, for the most part being thrown on boats in Exodus. So they wouldn't be killed or, whatever. That part of the family was split up between Cyprus, Egypt, and Greece. So that story begins there. Mother's side of the family is sort of unique. My grandfather, similar story. And we just had a small family reunion. So this story came up again, which was incredible. At the age of, we don't know the exact age, 14, 16, they were living in Smyrna in Asia Minor. And they found my grandfather, who was 14, 16 years old. Like I said, they found him a Russian uniform. He walked across the border. He had money in his pocket and he found his way to the U.S. So amazing story. And then from there, he flourished in Greece in the U.S. And then 20 years later, he came back very old school to find himself a wife in Greece. So there was a little bit of a betrothal. So this sort of rolls into my grandmother's story, where she was one of 8 children, second youngest, and she was married off. For lack of better words, however that happened, they lived happily. They had a great life. But yeah, she was uprooted and came to the United States. The only person she knew was her now husband. And they had 2 kids, and our family has flourished. So just, when you talk about courage on both those stories. So, leaving what is comfortable, what is familiar, or being forced to leave what is comfortable, familiar, and having to go uproot and go across the world. I think many of these stories exist in today's modern society too. I think I'm very fortunate to be where I am now, with the strength that grandparents showed. And also circling back to father's story, my dad's story is that his father made it to, they were living in the Greek community in the town of Mansoura in Egypt. And they were very poor from what I understood. And the way they had to improve themselves was through education. My grandfather, as I understood it, worked for a private school, Greek community school there. And that's how they were able to afford for the 4 kids to go to that school. And they progressed, the whole family, all 4, my uncle and my aunts, they progressed through the school. created a life for themselves through education. And they went back to Greece, got their degrees, and then made it to the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, and to summarize, I know it's we're short on time, and I could belabor
No,
that
no,
a
no.
lot.
That's totally okay. Yeah, yeah.
But I think
Please.
that story really hits home for Kurt because the difficulty, very young ages, they were leaving home and being uprooted for various reasons, from political, religious persecution, ethnic persecution, to the difficulties of not having a lot of money and
Yeah.
having to work really tough to make your way into today's society.
No, the reason why I'm able to relate to and resonate with your grandparents' story is because we Indians have gone through more than 200 years of British rule, and we had to bear partition of the country. A lot of
Yeah.
people had to leave their homeland and switch countries at the time when India got the independence. So there are lots of stories, and that's why relatability is very high when you narrate what your grandparents went through, how your parents managed to come up after all the movements that your grandparents had to go through. That kind of seeds the ground for embracing adversity. It kind of prepares your mind for not cribbing when, oh, the milk has not come, or oh, there's no food in the house.
Yeah.
The first thing is not panic, which would
Or
be
the
there.
milk is sour when you go for the milk.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm a strong fan of embracing discomfort, or even welcoming discomfort, or inviting discomfort, to be very precise. If
Yeah.
there is no disturbance or imbalance, I kind of get jittery. I'm like,
Yeah.
something's not okay.
I'm very much the same way. It's if everything's too comfortable, what's wrong?
Yeah,
Sorry. Here.
that's true. That's as far as your grandparents, your parents is concerned. But you had a fairly adventurous childhood. You mentioned about the fact that grew up in the Middle East, and also, why just take us down memory lane?
Mhm.
Some of the aspects about your childhood, which even your kids might not have heard. Let's hear some stories.
Yeah. Oh boy. I don't know if I should get into those. Yeah, I was probably the
I'll
biggest
allow you the
troublemaker.
editing option when the final
Yeah.
podcast is ready. Okay.
You let in a little bit of it. Yeah, I think the biggest lesson, growing up as an expat community, specifically, we lived in the Middle East, and it was while it was back then, it was the company was Saudi Aramco, predominantly American expat community compounds that we lived in, but it was multiracial, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and I
Yeah.
think that was at a very young age, growing up in that environment. There were some oddball people there but you didn't know any better in today's world where you have a lot of racism and the ethnic cleansing that still goes on. A lot of that, everyone was thrown into this unique environment, and we sort of all got along. We constantly, I talk with my brother and sister, and not that we were ignorant of it, but really lived in a society where you really didn't understand where racism got its roots until really we were in middle school, if not high school. You knew it existed, but then until you saw it, face to face, if that makes sense. And that was really unique. But within that, living in that international community at a very young age, back then in the Middle East, we did not have high schools. And so at a young age, many of us, 13, 14, went off to boarding school. In some countries, if you have that opportunity, you go off even sooner, sometimes, depending where it's at. So at a very young age, we went off to boarding school back in the US. It was a privilege, but also very different upbringing. So we were constantly somewhat nomadic, I guess, in that regard, where moving at a very young age, but also within our living in the Middle East, we moved around 3 or 4 times. So constantly at a young age, we had multicultural upbringing, but also being almost like very much like military, where you were moving every few years and you're forced into different environments. So there's a very strong underlying level of courage in that, where you have to become very adaptable and self-reliant as kids, with a measure of resilience.
Got it. And did the seeds of adaptability, self-reliance come in any particular instances from your childhood which stays with you? Someone stole your pencil box and you didn't get angry.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember this one instance where this one kid, it was probably a little bit on the bullying end, but I didn't know any better. I was still young. And I was like, all right, you broke my toy, so you have to give me $50 or something. And and it was one of those things. I look back now, it was like, oh, we're going to tell your parents, and I got taken for a loop on that one, and not really knowing any better. But Looking after that, I think it was just a lot of just in general growing up because we were constantly dealing with different people that we always had to understand different perspectives
Hmm.
and accept those perspectives, whether you liked it or not. So I think that understanding helped, yeah, I don't necessarily on the courage end, but that acceptance, sometimes acceptance, courage maybe even takes on the form of accepting people that you don't want to accept because their views might be completely different, especially today, relating it forward to today and today's polarizing
Yeah.
society with social medias and the way the algorithms are written and what have
Yeah.
you. So because of that, these individual understanding perspectives helps you grow as a person. And I see a quiet confidence that can be built through that. And then the self-reliance and being able to deal people and handle that situation in a way that's not confrontational.
No, that's a very important point that you mentioned. And then you went on to study chemical engineering in Florida State. I believe that you were part of the rowing team. So, a couple of
Mm-hmm.
questions. How did the idea of engineering come around? And did the seeds of physical sport activities like rowing, did that seed the ground for ultra endurance running later in your life?
The short answer to the latter question is yes, absolutely. The oddly enough, if you look at our side of the family, my dad's brother was an engineer, my dad was an engineer, and then me and my brother ended up being engineers. And now it's not some crazy story. I think looking back, engineering, it's something for me. It's something that came naturally to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for better or for worse, I tell my kids this is it's not necessarily the best path. It's the path that worked for me. I was comfortable with engineering and mathematics, and this is something that I knew I could be successful at. Having
Mm-hmm.
that courage to go forward in that, but in the same breath, knowing that I don't want to do this the rest of my life, but it's something that can provide for me and then a family down the road in the near term until I establish myself and have the courage to go out and find what that next step is for me and to break from the norm. Does that, you tracking with that? I
Yeah.
hope. So early piece from the endurance that really transitioned. I grew up playing sports. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned I rode on the club team at Florida State for a couple years. I wrestled through high school, played soccer growing up, loved that. So the sports was always part of my base. So there's always a measure of competitiveness.
And with all
I
these sports, you had a lot of injuries as well in those days?
back
No.
then, I'm fortunate not to. My first broken bone when we were talking earlier was when I had my foot crushed, and that was
Oh,
7 years
we're
ago when I
gonna
was
talk,
45. So,
we're gonna come to that.
sometimes I get looked at that and people look at me like, you made it 45 years without breaking a bone. Maybe I didn't have any courage and I just took the safe path the whole time. I don't know. Or maybe I was just super lucky. But no, I think it was very challenging at that point, making as you're saying, after finishing university.
Yep.
And, we're talking a little bit transitioning here in the courage of change. And
Yep.
I think that one of the sort of the flexion points, if you want to say, was I got married and we had kids, and the goal was for one of us to stay home with the family.
Yep.
And in today's society, even people like to say that it's changed, but the bottom line, I don't think it's changed very much. There's
Mm-hmm.
more people doing it, but people say they're more accepting. I went through and I ended up being the stay-at-home parent, and I dropped a very stable career working for the federal government, and that was a big change for my wife and I both. The easy thing to point out is financially, as we're starting a family and we're having young kids, and everyone knows that the economic impacts of the family. That took not a lot of courage, not just for me, but also my wife, because she was going into a role now that is still we both struggle with it at times, and that took us courage to make that decision to say, okay, I had the stable career. She was in human resources and banking,
Mm-hmm.
and we rolled the dice, we say, but we made that decision for us. So that took a lot of courage to throw aside the standard norms of society and say, okay, I'll be the stay-at-home dad. There's been some folks in the family, for probably the first 15 years of me doing it, even now, they'd say, what do you do? And before I can say something, it was like, oh, Alex is an engineer. I'm like, no, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And, without jumping too far ahead, it was different environments where, I'd be the only father in the classes for the little kids that they have here in the US, the tummy times and all that.
Yeah.
And, there'd be gatherings and, it's, what do you do? What do you do? It's like, well, I left my career to be the stay-at-home parent. And it's like, oh, I wish I had that job. I was like, maybe you do, but you're not in it every day. I'm not saying that it's a different perspective.
So, a stay at home dad is a terminology which is still not very common in India. So, I want to put across this question to you. What facet of fatherhood did you learn or did you understand or acquire being a stay at home dad, which the normal dad would never know?
God, that's a tough one. I don't know if I know the answer to that one. Looking back, I think there's a different type of patience and resilience that comes with the stay-at-home parenting. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I don't know if I've had the courage to be able to do it the right way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we stayed through it, seeing some people that go down that route and then they go back to work after a couple years. Not saying anything, but you can sort of tell that they couldn't handle it. Not saying that I was able to handle it, but I think there's just that different level of resilience and patience. It's the day-to-day, and the day-to-day can be a grind when you have little kids, and whether you're balancing work or not balancing work, you never have a dull moment. You live as a stay-at-home parent from when the kids get up, especially when they're infants. As they get a little older, then they start school, the dynamic changes. But early on, it's even when the kids are off to school, you have a window of like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. when they're in school. And you have to get all these things done because, as soon as the kids come home, when the kids would come home, there's I don't say chaos, but all of a sudden it becomes, you can't get anything done that you wanted to on your schedule. You have to focus on the kids. You got to focus on the dinner. All these little pieces together. You live your life early on in these bubbles of 1 and 2 hours where it's like, okay, early on the kids are napping. It's like, okay, what can I get done? What can I get done? And then it's about the errands that you need to run. So there's a different type of courage, and then also there's difficulty in that day to day because it wears on you, I believe. Yeah. Much like a long run.
True.
But so yeah,
I think if I was going to take a shot at answering my own question, it would be about building an opinion about how your child's day went, rather than asking the child how the day went.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I broke up.
I think the advantage of being stay-at-home dad, you get better at building an opinion about how the child's day went, rather than asking the child how the day went. Because if you're full-time working, then you're meeting the kid in the evening when everything which happened in school is kind of sorted and accounted for to a great extent after coming home and winding down and getting down to homework and all. But if you're dropping the kid in the morning, all enthusiasm, excited, cheerful, and then you're receiving the kid in the afternoon once this kid is back, you kind of build a broad understanding of how the day went. You might not even need to ask a few questions, because the smug look on the face or the happy look on the face might communicate a lot, and they're bubbling with excitement. The first parent they meet, they want to tell what happened, the bulk of the stuff. What is left in the evening is only the leftover. It's just like, okay, if you want to know, I'll tell you, but hey, it's not a big deal.
Maybe you develop the opinion or the intuition immediately with the sort of, and maybe that's, but spending a lot more time with the kids, like you immediately understand you can always read your kids' body language, but I think being around them even more, you understand that a little bit better. Yeah, and sometimes there's an expression, I don't know if this plays, what is understood need not be discussed sometimes. But yeah, you bring up a good point. You have those talks, how did your day go? You can tell that it went well, and maybe you can talk about other things and then get back to the school. You can maybe focus on other things, deeper questions when they would come home on the walk home. And, we were very fortunate too. We live a half a mile from the school, or a quarter mile. So every morning, at least during the elementary school days, we would be able to walk them to school with the other parents. Yeah. And it was nice and peaceful. It's never easy getting the kids out the door. But once you get them out the door and we're walking, it's nice. But yeah, there's a challenge in that, being different from the stereotype, and that was it wasn't difficult. It was probably the easiest decision we ever made. And I say we both, my wife and I, because it was, the priority was the family first. And if we don't build that strong nucleus as a family, that internal strength, and being able to show them, now they're older, 17 and 14, they understand these difficult decisions that we made, and they see the strength and courage in those decisions. It doesn't matter how much amount of money that we bring in. If we don't have that strong core strength as a family, what's it going to teach them in the future about their norms, the mores that they have growing up as adults? And we're very fortunate that We live a fairly comfortable life compared to a
Yeah.
lot of people in the world at this point. So, we try to show them constantly that things are good for us.
You had a stroke at a relatively young age at 26. Anything that stays with you? Was that like a big eye opener? Did it kind of remind you that, oh, I need to really quicken up all the stuff that I would want to do in life? Was there any such feeling that emanated from that?
It was a peculiar experience. I didn't realize that it happened when it happened. And just the quick, I like using this reference when people ask me about it. I had an uncle, and while he was 60, a month or 2 months later, he also had a stroke. And he was 60, and then he was ridden to a wheelchair. He had early onset dementia. Right. He passed within 5 years later. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. When I reflect on that, I consider myself very lucky. And that, I would say, it happened in a part of the brain, and I was able to recover quickly. Back then I was running, I'll say, just marathons, but compared to the 100-mile and the hurt that you talked about earlier. And I was in great physical shape, and I think that helped with my recovery. But that said, it was really impactful. Where it happens in the brain, it's really the luck of the draw on how you're able to recover and how quickly you can get to medical support. I was probably the worst case, where I didn't realize it was happening. I was away for work on travel, and things cleared up within about 10 minutes, and then I went back to bed, which is, if you read, that's the worst thing you can do. I didn't get to a doctor's until probably 36 hours later, and then they said you have a stroke. But the nutshell, so that little pitch is, if you know the symptoms, react quickly, because I definitely did not. And the fact that we're here today, how did my view change? Ever since then, not to be dramatic, but everything has happened since then for me is like the bonus plan. What I've seen and heard with other people with strokes, my life could have been drastically different. We wouldn't be having these discussions about courage and running and life in general. But there's never been an urge for me to I have to go accomplish this, or I don't have a bucket list. Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. I don't necessarily believe in bucket lists. I just, maybe, as the expression goes, pardon the French, a lot of people use it, do epic shit. Yeah. You've probably heard that within the ultra running community. Just finding great adventures to go out there and do. I think my only bucket list thing is to see the Northern Lights, and I just haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. Yeah, so there's never been an urge to go, got to accomplish. But I do believe I have this unique lease on life. And I think it's given me different perspective, because I could have died. And many people do die of massive strokes. Last month, and not being able to connect, my good buddy's best friend, my good buddy's wife, had a massive stroke and died.
Oh,
so it's, sort of giving me goosebumps, and that's just, I was very fortunate.
The abruptness of, they say, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So really moving forward with that and having the strength, the courage, again, going back to that, to continue to lead life in a way that is positive, not even for myself, but for other people, my family. And almost a little bit on the Buddhist thing, where it's, live your life in a way of strength and courage that will honor both your ancestors and your future generations.
Well said.
And I don't know if that's getting too touchy-feely, but yeah. So, hopefully I didn't belabor that too much. But yeah, it was impactful. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. It never is. And a lot of us, when we get stuck into the minutia of the day, sometimes we forget about that. And I'm guilty of that probably daily. But looking big pictures, nothing is guaranteed. Don't be excessive and overlive the moment. Be impactful.
So people who know you, and especially from your ultra running endeavors, might think that you've been running forever, but we both know that's not true. When did you get into running? What was your first run, if you remember? And who conned you into running?
God, who conned me into running? I didn't realize that running would take this type of impact in my life. But as I look back on it, I like I mentioned earlier, I always played the sports. But I grew up playing soccer as a youngster, and even did a little bit of soccer and while I was in university with a couple city leagues. And I realized that I always ran. So I had one of my friends in college, we would go run together. He's like, hey, let's do a 10K. And this was my senior year of college. I hadn't done a 10K before. That was the first race. And we went out and, we trained a little bit and got it done. And then I finished university. That was really the first run. My time was 52:25. Not knowing at all what I was doing. I just went out and ran, and probably had a 6-pack. I was in university, so I wouldn't be surprised if we had a 6-pack the night before. That kick-started it. I graduated a few months later. And then when I moved up to the Washington, D.C. area, I was new to the area and had a cousin who just run a marathon through an organization called the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And I thought, okay, what a good opportunity I'm out of my comfort zone here. I don't know anyone. Let's meet people. Easy way to meet people. And it sort of took off from there. And then about 5 years later, discovered a Bull Run 50 miler. That was my first, and that sort of decided, some people might say, started the spiral. Yeah, that was a great experience through the local club here in this area. Yeah, so I mean, nothing crazy or eventful. It was, wish I could give you some great story, but I think it was just, it was a natural progression, but a progression that where it came from was exploring where my boundaries lie. But that physical, going back to that physical, maybe the 3 tenets of courage, the physical, the emotional, and the psychological to an extent. And granted, we're not talking into doing right or doing wrong, but I think that's where are my boundaries, my personal boundaries. Where can I push myself? Again, going back to what you said, being uncomfortable.
And there is this event called 100 Miler.
Yeah.
I don't know what love and affiliation you have. You've done it like, 17 times? Who got you to Hurt in the first place?
That was related to my work before I left the federal government. And I was chosen for an assignment to go there for a year on the island of Oahu. So, being an ultra runner back then, like 4 or 5 years, I had not run my first 100 mile yet. And I went to the island of Oahu and I heard I was like, oh, I got there 4 days later, there's this race. So I went to this 50K and it was called the Triple Trek. And I met the group there, and then the same group put on the Hurt 100. Hurt stands for Hawaiian Ultra Running Team. So hence Hurt. And it hurts every time. But yes, I discovered that.
That hurts every time.
Yeah, I use the expression even now with the kids, and it can only hurt so much. There's a level, and at some point, it's just not going to hurt anymore. So you've got to keep going. But you have to have that strength and that willpower to push through that to keep moving. But yeah, so that's how I discovered it. You mentioned 17.
Sorry, a beautiful line comes to my mind. Stop telling God that you have a big problem. Tell the problem that you got a big God. Like
Tell
that?
The problem that you're a big... I like that.
Sorry, please continue.
No. After we're done, you got to send that to me. I know
no problem, I'll do that for you.
But no,
so you said it can hurt so much. I think you reach that stage after which nobody's even listening. Why am I complaining? Nobody's around to listen.
Unless you have a pacer with you. And then I'm sure my pacers will have an obnoxious amount of stories about me.
Not that the pacers are going to give a damn about what you're saying.
Yeah.
If it's a complaint, they're not listening.
Yeah, you just tell you to shut up. Did you drink water like I told you to? And I'll be, no, shut up and drink your water, man.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're not going to finish. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And if you don't finish, I can't finish as well. So better hurry.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I do want to throw in there. It's important that I finished at 17, but I've also not finished it twice.
How was that like? How was that feeling like? And was it like something completely out of hand for you? Or I love failures, by the way. I love failures. I love to hear those DNFs.
I think if you have to, in a very black and white, like being an engineer, the failure is a failure. That doesn't change, but you have to be able to reframe, to be able to pull, let's say, okay, I didn't fail, but what are the positives out of this moving forward? What was the real reason why I didn't finish? Why I failed?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have a bad tendency to sugarcoat our failures with these measures of acceptance. But I think bottom line, for me, like the failure is a failure. Yeah. But what positives can I pull of that so I don't repeat this? And sometimes there's powers that are out of your control. Sometimes there's weather. I mean, that you can be the best trained person in the world and still not finish. But to answer your question, this is an argument that I probably still take up with the race director every day. My very first Hurt, they used to have a 100K.
Okay.
The first couple years. I ran the 100K the first year. Why? Because 3 months later, I had already committed to 2 mates to run the Massanutten 100 mile here locally in Virginia, where I live. So that was our commitment. It was very tempting that night because I had spent 40 miles with this one guy, Steve, and we got to the divergent point where he kept going for the 100 miler and I would break away to do the 100K. And he spent about 5 minutes trying to talk me out of it. He's like, just keep going with me. I mean, you've got it. We're almost there. It's another 10 hours, 12 hours, we can do it.
Another 10 hours.
Yeah, or I should say another 20 hours because it was barely midnight at the time. And So, but the second year, and I share this, the second year, my awesome sister came out and she crewed me. My wife couldn't come out for work. Other than that, she's been there for just about every hurt. And I finished in mile 40. It got dark and I was doing everything. And then I just sat down in the chair and I started crying for whatever reason. Summed up to confidence. I lost my confidence. I was, I don't know, scared, did not want to be uncomfortable. I lost my confidence that I would be able to finish. And I still look back on that today. I sat in that chair. There was nothing wrong with me. There was no excuse other than I knew in my mind, I knew I can't finish this. My sister, she called my wife and you got her on the phone, and Christine tried to talk me out of it for 20 minutes and I just wouldn't have anything. I just went down this bad spiral. It was a great lesson. And that was at mile 40. I didn't turn in my bib. I went to my car and slept for 6 hours. And then went back to hand in my bib. And this one lady over there, I forget her last name, but she goes by Bozo. And she got me out of she said, look, Alex, you have 12 hours to do 20 miles. Just go out there and finish the 100K. That's a much better option than just sitting here and not even finishing that. I know you can do it. With more encouragement from her, my sister and a few other folks was able to go back out there. So that was a small victory that day. And then I'd say, knock on wood. Since then, I've been fortunate enough and finished every single hurt after that. There's lessons picked up from that. Absolutely. The easy one is that I lost the confidence. I lost the courage to keep going, to be uncomfortable. I lost the strength in that moment to have the decisions, but I still, clearly it sticks with me. And I'm happy that happened. That was a good learning point. We come to those decisions in our life. And I think sometimes, whether it's in the race or business or with the family, where we make probably the decision that was the easy decision that day. The tough decision would have been to get going, and I made the easy decision. And maybe that was the best thing that happened, sort of straight up, because of whether it doesn't matter that the 17 hurts, but it taught me that I could have pushed through that and created a different type of fire within me. That day, I had only completed 100. And that was 7 months earlier. So I'm sure a lot of people feel this, I've done the 100. I'm the best. I'm awesome. Run. Get the crazy mountains, run fast, do this. And, in that moment, it disappeared. But I'm glad it did.
Your ultra running, as you just mentioned, started with a bull run 50.
Yeah.
And now you've done about 60 plus. And there are a couple of unusual ones which you mentioned in your profile, the Dragon's Back Race and the Mogollon Monster. So for the global audience, which might not be very familiar with the ultras you've done, if these two are good, then why just tell us some of these offbeat, tough, but not talked about a lot ultras?
The Dragon's Back Race, that was unfortunately, I just read a couple months ago that the company that is putting on that has unfortunately folded. So for anyone listening out there who's got deep pockets, who I don't know what's going on, if he wants to take over a race organization and keep that.
Yeah, Alex, you're one of them. Come on now, you can do it.
Yeah. I don't know about the deep pocket. I'll talk to my family about organizing it. Absolutely. But no, Dragon's Back Race is a 6-day staged event that traverses Wales from north to south. So you start on the northern shore of Wales in a medieval castle called the Conway Castle. And then you traverse some of the most beautiful landscape you'll ever set foot on as a runner. Some of the most arduous too. You traverse over 6 days and you finish in Cardiff, Wales, in Cardiff Castle. So you start and finish into medieval. That's the fun part. In between it, each day is a stage. You have a pre-prescribed, in some cases, it's both what they call you get the experience, the true fell running that they do in the UK. And it's also a little bit of adventure race too. You have certain checkpoints you have to meet along a route. There's a prescribed route, but you don't have to take that route. So a lot of local people like offshoots, sheep trails that are a little bit more efficient to take. And many times the first few days, you're hands over fist.
It's sounding more like a treasure hunt more than a run.
It probably was. But it took a lot out of you. Your starting time is by 6 a.m. You have a window between 6 and 9, and you have to finish the route by 10 p.m. They set up camp for you. You have a pre-prescribed gear list every day. They have 8-person tents that you can pick if you're going with some running mates or something, you can pick your tents. You have breakfast in the morning and you have dinner in the evening. Now, this might sound posh, and easy. So what's the difficulty? The difficulty is if you're anywhere from a middle to back of the packer, the average runner is on their feet probably 12 to 15 hours every day. So if you start looking at that within those pockets of time, you still have to get ready for your run in the morning. You still have to eat in the evening. You still have to rehydrate. You still have to attend to any medical issues that you had that day. So all of a sudden, what you think is this big piece of time, you have to be so it's really a run, rinse, repeat every day. And it's just a standard wear and tear. And that was incredibly difficult to get through.
The daily mileage, total distance, how much? You said
it averages out to about 40. Yeah, I should have mentioned this earlier. The distance is roughly 380 kilometers with approximately 17,700 meters of vertical ascent. So roughly 2 Mount Everests from sea level to the top in terms of vertical ascent.
So I'm not avid ultra runner, but I do believe that people tend to hallucinate. Your brain is not as active. Now here you're saying you need to tread your own path, and also is your brain really working at this time to be able to really figure out, oh no?
It is. In this case, the nice piece with this event is you don't do a lot of running at night. So from that respect, when I ran the event twice, one time I finished, the other time I didn't, had to discharge medically because I bat my knee and it turned into a mushroom. So running it is very, very different because you're not running at night and you're actually sleeping at night. So you can maintain your normal circadian rhythms.
That helps. Yeah.
But you flip around to events like HURT. And this is sort of like not all 100 milers are created equal. Like with HURT, you have up to, depending on where you are in the race and depending where you are with the canopy, because you're running in a rainforest and sunlight can be very difficult to get through. You're running, you have anywhere from like 11 and a half to 13 hours of darkness. Most here, at least here in the US, most ultra marathons are in the summer. You might get 8 hours of pure darkness. So if you start putting those numbers together, but that doesn't change the fact that you will or may hallucinate in the middle of the night, see the expression little green men. I've seen little blue army men shooting bullets at me, running around to people. Not this HURT, 2 HURTs ago, I saw my daughters sitting on a log it looked like them, and they were yelling at me to keep running, stop walking. One of my first HURTs, it was coming up the second to last climb at this point, now sleepless for almost 30 hours. And there's a man hiding in a log filming me. And he was yelling at me, "You better run," because I'm filming. And this was climbing on the uphill. Your mind knows it's not real, but you're looking at it. One in this Hawaii, there's a bear sitting on a log looking at me. There's no bears in Hawaii. So why is the bear there? Just like random stuff like that. Both these races, speaking of the curves, especially the Dragon's Back was a unique in that day 5, which they say is the hardest, that pushed me to the brink. I'm running along and I just broke down crying and did not. I knew I was going to continue, but the thoughts were, everything was telling me just, this can be done. What's the reason to be going on? Just completely broke down. These types of events, I think people use the expression, they peel you back like an onion. I just say they don't do that. They just rip you apart to some extent. And that's where I think you really find an inner strength and rely on your self-reliance and your confidence to keep pushing forward.
So the Dragon's Back race is clearly the kind of unusual race which I wanted you to cite an example of. Maybe one more and maybe one which is still going on.
Yeah, one which is still going on. One that is near to my heart is the Route 100 in northern Greece. I was privileged to run that for a couple times. It's really special. You're really out there in the middle of nowhere in one of the largest old growth forests in Europe. It's called the Rhodope National Forest in Greece, and it borders Bulgaria. And then they have a piece of the forest on their side of the country, from what I understand. It's set up for self-reliance. There's only 6 aid stations. It runs roughly 112 miles. And you have just under 48 hours, I think 46 hours to finish it. You just run through absolutely gorgeous country trails that are, hundreds of years old. You run over these old bridges that formed sort of the network, the interstate network, 600, 700, and 800 years ago up in northern Greece for commerce. The organization is incredible up there. But for me, that one, granted, it's sort of the home country where my parents and family immigrated from Greece. But for me, it's just a different type of event. For me, it was like, okay, that was my first race that I ran outside of the United States, first 100 miler. And, I can speak the language, which I'm fortunate. It was
Why
different going over there.
You can't speak. Okay. Huh.
What's that?
You can't speak the language, you said.
Yeah, I can. That made it a little bit easier, but it was still a different place, a foreign place, definitely out of the comfort zone. But just much like all the other races and ultra running and the running community, the community was there, and the spirit of the people. Everyone wants you to succeed. There's strength. You see their confidence in you. They have that confidence that builds your strength to keep you pushing forward. Beautiful race takes place in the fall. So you've cooler weathers, but that's an absolutely incredible race. You also mentioned the Mogollon Monster, ran that for the first time. That's in the high desert of Arizona. The Mogollon Monster, the race runs along what they call the Mogollon Rim. And it has a very unique history. I think Mogollon, if I understood it correctly, is sort of like the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch is the name of the monster in that area that lurks at night that people see. But it traverses this natural geologic feature called the Mogollon Rim, which is about 100 miles long. And you traverse up and down it throughout the race for just over 100 miles, like 100.2. Go up and down the rim. So you start the race at 6 a.m. The rim faces south. So as you climb with the sunset. So anytime you look back facing south, you have this panoramic, beautiful view going east to west of the sunrise. And the rim, its highest point is about 3,000 feet, 2,000 to 3,000 feet. And it varies. So you're constantly traversing. Down low at 5,000 feet, it's more of a desert climate. But then when you get up to 7,000, 8,000 feet, you reach sort of this alpine forest with lots of fir trees. Yeah, so you're just running these little different microclimates, different ecosystems throughout the race. Those probably are the three top ones.
Very interesting, man. It's surely very well described. I'm just feeling like, if not as a runner, but just visiting these places and seeing the topography for myself would be quite an experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, not to get off task, but I think that that's always the allure is we have this gift, whether it's marathoning or being an ultra race, we have this gift to explore, probably, not to get all philosophical, but be able to explore the way our ancestors did hundreds of years back. Now we use, whether it's motorcycles, cars, bikes, different modalities, but going back to something a little bit more primitive, people don't do anymore, and be able to explore that way. And I think there's going back to courage, there's a courage that comes with that, because you're really exploring. Where I go run regularly, week in and week out, the long runs are always pushing a marathon or ultra hours on the feet. Right. Having that courage and confidence to go out there on your own, knowing that something bad can go wrong, whether it's you're not the apex predator like we are in our concrete jungle. Yeah. We're pretty low on the totem pole when you start to factor in mountain lions, bears, and other things that, you've got various venomous snakes and other creatures that are out there. So there's a misunderstood courage that can go with understanding those dangers as we explore.
So at some point of time, you moved from running to becoming a race director. Was that transition because of you being stay-at-home dad, or there's a story behind it? How did the whole shift happen?
That is, to be pointed, that is how the shift happened. It was that for me, I needed, I was a stay-at-home parent, but I needed something to, because eventually the kids are, our kids are 17 and 14 now. And bottom line is, those dynamics have changed very much from when they were in elementary school, maybe up through 12 years old, where there's still a lot of hands-on parenting. Now my daughters are out of the house between 6 and 7:30 in the morning. Yeah. And the older one is driving. So until they come, sometimes she's not back till 6 or 7 in the evening. The younger one comes home 3, 4, 5. That dynamic has completely changed. So part of it was, what am I going to do in my future? I love the organization. I'm an engineer, but I've always been fascinated by logistics. I fell in love with the community, ultra running community, that I enjoy being a part of it. And I said, this is something that I can get a lot of satisfaction, which I can get into in a little bit. But the bottom line was, I'm getting into this is a career that can be scaled as my function of time continues to increase as the kids get older. 4 years, both kids will be gone for college. I'm not the stay-at-home dad anymore. One could argue that now I'm just a shuttle service for their activities and go get the groceries. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. So that really was the impetus. But the question of what drives that was the want to give back to the community. Because the strength, hopefully illustrating earlier what happened with me at Hurt for my first DNF there, sort of illustrate the strength that, and as you look back, I think it's a strength that I always knew I had in me. What was that switch that flipped it, made me realize I have the confidence to say that I can conquer anything you put in front of me. I'm comfortable saying that. Present me with the problem. I have the confidence to push through it, the courage to get through it, and find a solution. That's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, I think, which is a whole other philosophical discussion. But yeah, sure. So the transition was to give back to people and to be able to, hopefully that they can find that something in them. Does that make sense? To give back to the community. And that's where it's developed race directing now, being able to support other organizations in race directing. One recent race that I just started race directing, the Manitou's Revenge, all the proceeds from that event go towards purchasing land in the state of New York.
Okay.
So I say that for me, that's sort of like the apex at this point. What better opportunity, not only are you giving back to the runners, but also to the lands and preserving lands, through that organization.
So I got this question for you, Alex. Mm-hmm. Becoming a race director, what did you learn about race directors, which as a runner you never knew and cribbed about?
What I learned about runners from race directing?
No. After you became a race director, what did you learn about race direction, which as a runner you would have probably been very angry about or upset about? Or what is it about opinions of race director which you changed once you became a race director yourself? Let me explain. So, ultra running is tough. Especially trail running is tough. And a lot of times you will be like, hey, this guy should have done this here, or, there should have been a marker here, or this is what they should have given us for nutrition, or, hey, there were not enough light. We tend to believe that, okay, I paid for this event, I should get what I want. And if I get anything less, I'm going to blame it on the race director. But obviously, race directors have an opinion of their own. So here's your chance to unwind and say, okay, this is something which was humbling for me. Once I became a race director myself, and I realized that it's easy to look from a runner's perspective, but a race director's perspective is much more evolved and much more difficult than what any runner would ever appreciate.
That is a really good question. For me, I found that like when I run races now, unless there's something really, really wrong, you're not going to hear a complaint from me. Does that make sense? Like race directing is difficult. I like to use the expression that at the end of the day, it's the race director's fault. It's no one else's fault. You can't make everyone happy, but you do your best. I think there's always going to be people that complain. To unravel it, you quickly figure out like people who have never volunteered before. There's a measure of entitlement sometimes because I was like, hey, I paid for this and this should have been this way, this should have been that way. Yeah. And a lot of the bottom line is an organization, like we do our best to get it right all the time. And sometimes we get it wrong. People need to understand that I'm sorry that we're not perfect as humans. And that said, the big focus, answering this the right way, is focus is always on the safety. Sometimes miscommunications. One thing that is really special about the community, take a step back, with the races that I host and a lot of other races, it's a very strong volunteer community. And what starts to bother me when people complain is, yes, it's my fault. I need to complain. Maybe I didn't do something to explain something correctly to a volunteer, or maybe there's an action that I delegated that did not need to be delegated. Because as we say, we can be our worst critics. But that said, of all those things that would get me angry the most is when the participants airing the dirty laundry, you were asking, right? Is when participants yell at the volunteers. That's happened maybe once or twice over the years. Once just recently, as volunteers got yelled at. And that's where you're going to make me angry. Then we're going to have some words with that participant. Because bottom line, and we're always very clear. And sometimes that people can get heated in the moment. But the bottom line is people are giving up their time because they love being in the woods. They love helping people. And that's why we race direct too. But if you're yelling at these volunteers, I'm the person. Bottom line, like I said, it's my fault every time. And I'm comfortable enough to absorb that risk. And we do our best as an organization to make sure that we mitigate it at every step of the way so every customer's happy. But yeah, that answers the question. That's where pretty much take everything. But as soon as you start yelling at the volunteers that are out there helping, then things change. So hopefully you touched upon an important point when you mentioned that
you decided to become a race director, apart from the fact that you had time, was because you wanted to give back to the community. You wanted to give
Yeah.
it back to the society or the volunteers who had been part of it. The very fact that you yourself had a great experience in the runs that you did, and you had a positive impression about the role of the race director, is what prompted you to pick it up. If you
Yeah.
had not had great experiences, you would not aspire to be a race director, because you would think race director is a shitty job. I'm not taking shitty job. But the
Yeah.
fact that you knew that the guy was doing good thing, you wanted to be doing a good thing. That's what probably motivated you to go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially early on, the early positive experiences with the Bull Run. My second one was JFK, and then I went back to Bull Run again. But yeah, it was those positive experiences. How can I give back and share my positive experiences? Really, I mean, that's the impetus.
If you're supposed to choose between two options of becoming a race director for a new event, option one is to find a tough and a gruesome course which will test the endurance limits of the runners. Second one, identify a difficult but not scarily tough terrain which will allow the runners to explore some beautiful topography and go through a terrain which is not as easy to explore on foot otherwise, but because the race is happening, that's how you do that. Which of the two options is a more likely choice for you, and does that really represent the larger community of people who actually organize these runs?
Can I have an option C?
Go ahead, please.
What's that? Can I give my? No, I won't give an option. That I gotta say straight up, that's really tough because I really enjoy difficult, challenging events as long as the body holds up. When you get those really extreme events, you have a different level. Like there's a different competitor out there, if that makes sense. It's sort of there's a different competitor, different mindset.
And you know what? The reason I've asked you this question, you're touching upon that. If I make it a really tough race, the number of runners would be less. And if the number of runners are less, the economics might not work out as a race director. Or it
Yeah,
might make it prohibitively expensive for the few runners.
yeah,
So you
absolutely.
probably need to draw the balance there and say, no, I can't, I can't like scare away the runners. They don't even participate. I mean, what am I going to do with the chart in a program if
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
have the same number of participants coming in?
Yeah, I mean, that factors in a lot too. But in the end, there's a population out there that likes the extremely tough, and they're going to be smaller. Like you said, are you going to make money? As long as the event can sustain itself, I'll go for it. But to answer your question specifically, I would go with option two. In a lot of going to what we speak about, been talking about courage today, and there's a greater population out there that can have the opportunity to experience I've experienced or in that platform that I've experienced, discover something about themselves. To have, I'll do the easy plug of an event that we have coming up in 2 months, the West Virginia Trail Fest. When you said option two, I think this Trail Fest really hits option two. We have 4 different distances from a 5K, 30K, 50, and now 100. Then we also have a kids fun run. It's over the Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S., which is a 3-day holiday. As you said that, these 4 races, even though they're distinctly different, offer that opportunity where someone who is just getting into the sport, for whatever background, even to someone who is very hardcore about it, who's already at that option one that you mentioned earlier.
Got it.
It covers that whole spectrum. The option one, you're going to get tough people and probably really tough people, gritty. I hope that doesn't sound wrong, but from a courage standpoint, like they know exactly what they're getting into. They know how arduous it's going to be. But everyone has to start somewhere. I started with that 10K. I started with that 5K. And these long distances are not, I don't think a 5K is any better than a 10K is any better than a 100K or a 100 miler or 200 miler. It's what you need to do for yourself as a person to feel good and explore your boundaries, those boundaries that we talked about earlier, the way you need to explore them for yourself. So I think the option two affords a lot more people that opportunity, and you give that opportunity to people, you give them the positive impact. And I've seen it many times over the years where someone finishes a race. Many of our races are set up. We have about 20 to 25% are brand new people to trail running into the ultra running community, transitioning from like even 5 miles to a marathon, ultramarathon. And for that opportunity of self-discovery, whether courage or confidence, teaching yourself something new that you didn't know about, resilience, breaking through that psychological barrier where you wanted to completely quit. That's why I would take option 2. Not so much for, I'm not gonna lie, I think there's a lot of self-gratitude that I get from being able to see those people at the finish. But I'll say personally, you can see the change. Sometimes to the people, you sense that there's a change when they didn't think that they could accomplish something like this, and they put all the time and the effort and the training, and something has changed about them. That makes sense.
I think it does help as well. I know you would have preferred an option C, which could be a combination of both of them in the same event. So there is a nice route, there is a treacherous route. All of you, please come, welcome. First 50 miles is going to be common for all of you. Then you take the nice route or the treacherous route, depending on your level. Best of both worlds. But anyway, I didn't want to give you that option. You would have picked it up anyway.
No, I'm glad you didn't. It's like anything in life. It's like you got to make a choice. And then once you do, you've got to march down that path, whether you like it or not.
Exactly. Another question which is coming to my mind is the sport of ultra running predictable in terms of the results? Or do you more often than not find surprise someone who didn't look like a solid runner surprise the more pro and established runners more often than not?
In that aspect, nothing surprises me in the sport anymore.
No? Okay.
The reason I say that, one thing that I've come to see from the ultra running community is, like you see, there's the beautiful thing about it is that with the ultra running, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you are. In ultra running, all types of communities, people, shapes, sizes, which is sort of very different from road running mindset. This is stereotype of the skinny, the thin, the fast. And with ultra running, I laugh at it. People, oh, wow, you ran 100 miles. How long did it take you? Well, I'll use the Hurt, for example. Like, all right, for me, it always takes me like 32, 33 hours.
Yeah.
And you do the math in their head, and they're like, that's a 19-minute mile. Call that running? So I can still go out there and still drop 7s and 8s, and maybe a 6 if I'm lucky on a good training block. So from that aspect, it's like all different shapes and sizes, and it's about working together to get to the finish. So,
and which is coming to my mind as you're speaking, and I've got lots of ultra runners on the podcast so far. The physical demeanor does not tell you anything.
The physical
demeanor of the runner does not give you anything.
No, it doesn't. Zero. Right? Zero, right?
You might find these small, petite women, and she might have just done Badwater Ultra, and she's actually done. And you'll look at her like, really? You did it? Because face doesn't say it.
Yeah.
And you're right to a great extent, because if I look at a lineup in marathon, you can look at Kipchoge and say, okay, he runs marathons.
And he's probably going to be fast. And you know he's going to be, just by his physical features.
Exactly. But in ultra running, as you rightly said, it's never about speed. It's about mental endurance to be able to withstand those moments when a lot of people might either go really slow or might fall out. And this guy will be flying at that same moment.
In that same vein, one thing that I've always loved is that, when you finish an ultra marathon, even though the culture is changing a little, like no one generally asks you what your time is. How many times I've been asked?
Thank God they don't ask. Thank God.
Yeah, right. But then when you do, so like, all right, are you like a hardcore road runner? You're trying to balance me? Then ask me what my 5K time is. And I think part of that is too. I mean, you have such a variance in the routes.
Yeah.
You have, like you mentioned, the Badwater, which is you climb up to Mount Whitney, but a lot of it is on road and it's 120 degrees. To the other extreme would be Hurt 100 or the Dragon's Back race in Wales or the Western States. Pinnacle too, which you're on single track trails. You have lots of vertical ascent, lots of vertical descent, and you're on trail. You're not on road where you can pick that turnover up and maintain a faster cadence. And then, by the way, some of these technical races you run at night, which means you slow down even more. But yeah, like no one outside of probably the elites in some of the races, generally no one cares what time you finish at. You finish. And the cool thing is we do with our events is you honor, the last person, we call them the DFL. If you know what that term stands for, should we use expletives on the...
Sorry, what's that?
Dead freaking last, insert expletive for freaking. When I finished the Dragon's Back race, the gentleman who was the slowest on the course over the 6 days, that dude got the biggest trophy. And he earned it, because I know for a fact that he struggled more than myself
Yeah,
and probably anyone else out there. And that's,
that's true. I agree with you on that. When you're beating yourself against the entire world is contrived against you, and you still touch the finish line, is a far bigger achievement than someone who got to the finish line few hours back
yeah.
because
And
he
it
was
doesn't
so.
matter what the race is.
Doesn't matter what the race is. You're
Yeah.
so right on that. It's interesting you mentioned that because Tokyo Marathon is known for ruthless in cutting out the race once the time limit has crossed. And they
Mhm.
actually have people who are designated as sweepers. So they will be
Yeah.
like, come on, move, come on, move. So the person who's at the end, he's not worried about whether he's touching the finish line. He's wants to ensure that the sweeper is far behind him. So he doesn't want to get the embarrassment of being pushed towards the finish line. You're right on that part. And I'm slightly deviating from the topic. Can I build an analogy for life by what you mentioned about ultra running? If you're
Yeah.
going to live 80 or 90, you don't care how much money you had or have. It's just going to be okay, you're 80. You lived 80 years. But if
Mhm.
you're 30 or 40, whether the world thinks or not, but you are surely thinking how much money I've made, how many experiences I have. And as they grow, as you go from 40s to 50s to 60s to 70s to 80s, all this becomes useless, pointless. So
Yeah.
similarly, in ultra running, as you rightly mentioned, you're not worried. Some people might be like, okay, yeah, I did it in 12 hours. Let me try for 11 hours, 50 minutes this time, or 11 hours this time, or whatever. There would be a few people, outliers, who would
Yeah.
be
And I think we all compete with ourselves to an
exactly,
extent,
and
because we
that's the
want to
best
be
way
able to
to,
improve.
and that's the best benchmark because you only know yourself and what more you can extract. You don't know where
Yeah.
the other bloke next to you is from. You don't have his race profile or running profile. So you're better off that. But that helps because once you are looking at a qualitative running experience, where is time got to do with anything? As long
Yeah.
as you
No,
enjoy those 80
yeah.
miles.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that has changed with me in the last couple of years, with the injuries we talked about earlier, that I'm fortunate to be able to still do what I started doing 25 years ago between, so oddly enough, the stroke was before I started ultra running. So within my tight friend community, they just say that made me crazy, which, is not a nice thing to say, but,
Not yet
they
being
just say,
connected so far.
yeah,
There's no medicine, no
um,
treatment for that.
yeah, exactly.
Coming to the injuries, so 2019 foot
Yes,
crushing, what
yes.
exactly happened?
So with the injuries, sorry about the sort of going to perspective that in my late 30s, early 40s, I was very competitive with myself. To an
Mhm.
extent, I still am. But now that frame was out there doing these great runs, it really now has become about the experience.
Hmm.
Not to say that I wasn't, what I want to achieve out of the ultra running has changed. For example, this past hurt, I was wearing Band-Aids going into the race. So I consider myself very lucky to finish. And the opportunity to share the trail with a good mate of mine. And he paced me 7, 8 years back. And he came back out on the last loop, got to spend the time with my daughter. It ended up being about the experience. He's like, okay, so Ben's expression was, let's go fishing and catch some people ahead of us to keep me motivated. And he said, and this one young guy passed us. We had a little story. And the young kid asked, have you finished this before? And I said, yeah, I've run it a couple of times. And Ben, promptly says he's finished it 17 times. And and I say, Ben, well, you finished 8 times. So stop being humble on me. Then the young kid left and he's like, so are you ready to run? Should we chase him down? I looked at it, I was like, you know what? Like, no. I said, let's just have fun out here together. We've got 3.5 hours to finish this. Let's make a good memory. That's where the perspective has changed. I got to spend time on the trail with my daughter, a couple other friends for the first time. That was much more valuable than was my slowest time at 35:30, the
Yeah,
35:03. Maybe I could have got 20 minutes faster, 30 minutes faster. That didn't
yeah,
matter. The point
that's
is
true.
that I was able to share it with my great crew, my family. That perspective and that frame of reference is much
Yeah,
more valuable than just straight up having fun out there and
right.
doing it much more. And it's much more rewarding than chasing the time.
Yeah.
Everyone's a little bit different.
You wanted to share what exactly happened in 2019. How did you end up crushing your foot?
Geez, we were 15th wedding anniversary. We were canyoneering in Utah 3 days before a 100-mile foot race. And there was the Scout Mountain 100. And the long short of it, we were canyoneering in the slot canyons, and there was a log that was over the slot canyon. So I climbed up on the log to take a photo op. And here, you'll laugh at this. Here, this will probably be backwards, but that is about 30 seconds before it happened. So I don't know if you can read that quote.
I know what you mean.
Yes. So that log, as I went to go off of it, it dislodged, and it was a crushing blow to my foot. Broke 2 bones. That was a good reality check. We were 2 miles in from where we needed to hike out, so I still needed to hike out 2 miles.
Feet. You didn't have a helicopter.
And I fell about 8 feet. I'm sorry?
You didn't have a helicopter to pick you and take you somewhere?
No, we had to walk out. It would have been nice. We had to do 3 rappels. So I had the broken foot, that fight or flight mode, that kicked in immediately. It was a great experience to feel that adrenaline, but that's something I would prefer not to again. You know what it's like now. And it was a full body check. Everything was good. Foot was killing me. And about a minute, are you okay? I'm all right. And then I just said, we need to go. Because I could still limp. I could walk. As you know, you have about 15, 20 minutes before the adrenaline starts to wear off.
True.
So I said, we need to get moving. We said, we've got 2 miles to the rappel. Getting into the details. One guy ran ahead to get a walking boot. Made it about a mile before the pain finally started to kick in. Got the boot about a half a mile after that. And then at that point, like the pain fully started to set in. I couldn't put any weight on the foot after about a mile and a half. And then they had to, at that point, we were in the clear and just walking. But that was one of the life-changing experiences, I think, that it sort of put life right front and center, and knowing that you're just a quick misstep away from being stuck in the middle of nowhere, even on the trails.
The recovery took how long after that?
I was in a boot for 6 weeks, and happened early May. And then, as soon as it happened, it's like, okay, I know I can't run Scout Mountain, and like, okay, I have 7 months to get ready for her. That was sort of the focus. Oddly enough, or sadly enough, I don't know. But there was that determination was there. It's like, okay, I'm not going to let this stop me from doing what I enjoy and love, and being able to share it with the people that I love.
And then you finally made it to the hurt.
Yeah, that year, that was 2020. Yeah, it happened in 19. So yeah, right when COVID, that was right when COVID was starting. Yeah, and then everything shut down. Yeah, but it was difficult. It was a little bit difficult getting back. There was a loss in confidence, not knowing how the body and the foot would react. That was an adjustment, and like another flexion point, and showing another stepping stone, get additional confidence, showing that persistence and resilience, and hopefully being a good example to the kids.
Have your kids already got inspired into ultra running, looking at you? What's their opinion about what their dad does?
You'd have to ask them. I don't want to put words in their mouth. So both my girls are not runners, and I'm happy with that. Sort of straight up, they find running down the road, then that's something we'll be able to share together. This past year, my oldest daughter ran a section of Hurt with me. That was really, really special. But both of them, they lead active lives. The older one's a rower and a hockey player. She wants to compete at the university level. The younger one is very much into gymnastics. So they enjoy being active, physically active, and leading an active lifestyle, I think, is what they'll end up doing. So hopefully, if anything that they've pulled from me doing all this, to stay active. I mean, we all know the benefits of just being physically fit, and nothing to belabor there. So, but I'm content with them not being runners. If that comes, it'll come with time.
Of course, true. That's true. What's coming up for you next?
Next is a race in the Swiss and Italian Alps called the Ultramarathoner, which is I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, 106 miles in the, like I said, Swiss and Italian Alps, almost 40,000 feet of vertical ascent. So first, the world's longest suspension bridge for pedestrian crossing. Across glaciers, looks like the average elevation is at about average altitude is about 7,500 to 8,000 feet. You cross multiple mountain passes. You start at about 5,500. You peak out at about 11,500 feet, and they give you 60 hours. To put it in context, the UTMB has, I've never run it, but only 33,000 feet of vertical ascent. So almost 25% more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
See.
yeah, so that's what's next. That's what's next on
Interesting.
the docket. How about yourself?
I got a swimathon coming up. It's on the 12th April. I'm doing a 10K swim. I'm doing my next Ironman in Thailand, Estonia, which is in
Oh wow!
August. And then I'm running the New York World Major, October end.
In November.
Yeah,
So you'll be here in the U.S. in November then, huh?
I will be there. I hope our plans can coincide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, let's chat. We'll absolutely figure it out. No, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. One run which you would have rather been a race director for, and one run which you are a race director but you would have rather been running.
So one run which I would rather be race director for.
And you have run it, but you would have rather been a race director, which you would feel proud to be managing yourself.
Would be the race in Greece. The organization. I love the route, and there was running that race is just a special connection for me.
I'm sure that's true. Last question. This is my favorite part. What's a question you have for me? I always believe in giving back.
What's that?
I always believe in giving back. I want to give you the chance to ask me.
No. So there's a couple things. So I bought your book. I have not had the opportunity to start it. I don't like starting multiple books, so reading multiple books at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm about 50 pages away from finishing the one right now to start yours.
Which book are you reading?
Project Hail Mary, the one that they just made a movie about.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, sort of. And I switch things up on my readings, like 3 previous biographies: Russell Frederick Burnham and Swan Frock's Marion, what's his name? Francis Marion, and then also Daniel Morgan. I like certain elements of American history.
Okay.
So they went biographies, and I just needed to change it up. But, there's a lot of science involved in it.
Got it.
But no, but the question for you, and I'll probably get this answer from the book. You've drawn a lot of inspiration for your father. You've started the whole Courage Talks. What's it for you? What's the giving back? Yeah, but what drives you internally to create these talks in your father's spirit? Because that's the sense that I've gotten. What's that internal piece that drives you with that connection to your father?
That's a very good question, and I think my dad lived a whole life. There's a beautiful book called Die Empty. My father was made aware of the concept very late in his life, probably a year before he passed away, and he loved the whole concept of Die Empty. I don't know if you're aware, but concept of Die Empty is the world's richest source of knowledge are the cemeteries, the graveyards, because people, when they die, they give away their valuables, their house, their property, the money. What they don't give away is their knowledge. In the last 12 months of his life that I was fortunate to be with him most of the time because of his illness, he made sure he passed on every piece of information which he had ever captured in his life. And I was like, I don't know whether you find it useful or not, but I'm giving this to you. Take it. And I found that to be very, very divine, I would say. We tend to judge people. Like, I might not tell you about Indian curry because I don't know, where is Alex going to make Indian curry, or why would Alex be interested in Indian curry?
I love Indian curry, by the way, just so we're clear.
There you go. But if I don't even evoke my interest or evoke my knowledge or share my knowledge, it's going away. You sat on a podcast for 2 hours with an Indian and you didn't get to know that he makes the best Indian curries.
No, but if you send me the recipe, I'll try to copy it and fail incredibly. But at least I've got the recipe.
The other interesting book, which really touched me, is the book by Arnold Schwarzenegger called Be Useful. And of course, he's now in his 80s and he's a phenomenal career. But that terminology of be useful, he embodies that principle right now in his age. And that's what the whole book is all about. And I'm like, I've got solid hands, workable hands. And if I don't use them to help an old man pick a bag where some laborious work is involved, I've not used my hand in the day. Now, obviously, in all practical purposes, you might not be able to use all your potential on a given day. Fine. Can you use it in a given week? Can you use it in a given month? Can you use it in your lifetime? So if I have potential and that potential is not making an impact on anyone, that potential is as good as not being there. And it was transformative for me in my corporate career in 2016 when I had
Yeah.
spent 16 years in my corporate life, and last job was with a company called Intel. I realized that I was not using my knowledge at all. Somehow these big organizations, they keep endorsing or passing on more designations to you, a better salary, a better lifestyle, but you're not necessarily using your knowledge the way you would want it to be used. And I started questioning, I mean, did I go for an engineering degree for this job in Intel? No. Did I do an MBA to do this job in Intel? No, because none of that knowledge is getting used. I'm like, then why am I sitting here? I'm not being useful. And then I discovered this whole world of startups because I started as an angel investor and I started interacting with young founders, 20 something. And they're like, sir,
Mhm.
please, sir, give us 5 minutes, sir, give us 10 minutes. I'm like, here, these people are like valuing my 5 minutes and 10 minutes. And there in Intel, my colleagues are not even interested in spending a minute with me, even though I'm there the whole day. So I
Yeah.
saw a big mismatch between what am I capable of and what I'm doing. And I think that was, again, strongly resonated with the way my dad lived his life. As you know, old people don't like to, I mean, especially old men don't like to sit idle. And my dad was
No.
like a super
Yeah.
personified example of that. He would be
Yeah.
like poking
My
his
father's the
nose
same
in.
way. He can't sit still. He tries, and he's going on 85. He's still walking around their
You
house
know,
and fixing things, and yeah,
that's what ensures their sanity.
yeah,
That's what ensures their good health. The moment they sit down and just watch the birds, they're gonna die very soon because it's difficult for the body to activate itself. You need to let the mind activate the body. And if
yeah.
your mind is going slow, body will just grasp that moment and say, okay, now I'm gonna relax. So no, I think that's been my learning. Hey,
No,
fantastic,
that,
Alex. It's been a
yeah.
beautiful conversation, and I surprised myself with the kind of questions I could come up with. Thanks to your openness and your depth of knowledge that you have in this field, which allowed me the confidence to throw those questions to you.
Cheers. No, thank you. I'm not going to lie. Some of them were challenging. I'm going to say, unlike some other podcasts, like you made me think. You- uh,
So one of the questions which I've always wanted to ask is when you're running for hours together, you have all kind of weird wishes, what you would want to be eating or what would be the funny food that you would desire, which is not available. That's one aspect which always
Mhm.
intrigues me of ultra running. So what are your quirky eating habits before, during, or after run?
This is funny. I don't know that I have quirky eating habits. I've been fairly regimented in it, but what I find bizarre across all these events
Uh-huh.
is the personal hygiene management, is what I like to
Okay.
call it. I had one coach that said, "Don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things."
That's
So,
a good one.
yeah, so like across all the sports that I play is like that. The one thing that I always find peculiar, and you're talking to an ultra runner when they freely talk about this, is you got to take care of the plumbing. Whether you're a man or a woman, I've seen where the chafing happens. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we experience it in triathlon and
Yeah.
marathon, and making sure that you take care of that stuff the right way and
Yeah.
understanding what it can do to you. I've had so that's sort of.
Yeah.
I've got the one experience. My one buddy, I delve into this. He was running a local one, Old Dominion 100.
Yeah.
And I told the story at his wedding. He was on his third date with his wife, and she's an incredible athlete. And he just did not take care of his plumbing well. And he's at mile 80, and he's coming down the thing, and it just he takes off his pants, and they were on their second date, third date. So he's like, I can't go anymore, and you got to be able to know how to take care of the plumbing in any race.
That's
And
very.
he rips off his pants and he's holding up his shirt, and he's just the expression, he's free balling going down the trail.
Oh man.
And and this is, and Tara's like, they've been married 12 years now. So clearly he left an impression. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was horrible because it didn't look, but
Yeah.
he couldn't do anything other than he's got his shorts in one hand. He's got his stuff in the other hand. He gets to about 50 yards before the next aid station. He has to put on his pants again. He walks in and he says, I got to stop. Quirky things. I don't know if that's necessarily quirky. I wish I had like a funny food that I've eaten, but that's just one of my funny stories. And ever since then, I always tell Scott, that's not going to happen to me. So
the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, what is the non-running skill of yours, crossover skill, which the world might not know and you always would want to talk about?
Non-running skill that's crossed over into the...
You can't be taking that long, Alex. Come on now.
I don't know. It's like the personal hygiene. I got to go back to the personal hygiene because that sort of rolls over into whether it's other sports, taking care of your stuff. Crossover skill, probably would say everyone does it a little bit differently, but the attention to detail and doing research. And I think that I've had, as a race director, have people in races, they come up and, we had one guy is like, and this is one of our easier races. It was almost like a gravel road. And then like, no, this race is much too technical for me. I need to drop. Classic Greek expression.
Got it.
Like, did you not read what we had on the website? It says this is single track trail. There's roots, there's rocks.
Yeah.
Each 5 miles has 600 feet of vertical change. Come back to the start finish over and over. But yeah, so it's that sort of that belabors the point. But yeah, doing your research and knowing what you're getting into, or same thing when you're going to present to your business partners or to the leadership group of an organization, you've got to do your research. You've got to make sure you put everything together, compile everything, the business end, or the startups. You're looking for, all right, what's the business plan look like? Is this financially sound? Doing your research, knowing the market, a lot of that. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I get a little bit lazy in my races, but I think there's a lot of crossover with making sure that you do your research, paying attention to the details.
And I think that's the obvious transition to the race director role. That the fact that you are so detailed and enough attention to all the specific, minute things is what made you gravitate towards the director role, right? That helped as well.
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, that and being able to give back, to be able to share that opportunity, that window for people to explore within themselves and to find something that maybe they knew that didn't exist.
Makes sense.
Yeah, this was an honor. It was a real treat to spend the time with you. And I hope we can keep chatting and hopefully get you here to, I'm going to be selfish and bring you over to the dark side of Ultra.
Sure. Let's try that. I don't mind playing ball.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks a lot, Alex.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
It was a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you.